Hello, welcome to Raising the MAST. We're going to look at the groundbreaking multi-agency safety testing, drugs testing at festival AIF member events this season. It was implemented at Secret Garden Party in Kendal, Cardiff. We're going to look at the background, the key issues, the processes, the results and the next steps. I'm James Hanley from Music Week. I'd just like to give the panel a chance to introduce themselves individually.
Hello, Steve Rolls from Transform Drug Policy Foundation.
Hi there, Freddie Fellows, founder of the Secret Garden Party. Drape, ground control, producer of a wide number of festivals.
Fiona Measham, Professor of Chronology at Durham University and co-director of the Loop.
Hi, I'm Justin Bibby, I'm a senior police officer with Cumbria Constabulary and I'm the corps commander for John's chemical.
Thanks guys. If Fiona wouldn't mind starting us off, we'd just like a bit of background on MAST testing and how the idea has evolved from the Loop's previous forensic testing at events.
Okay, thanks. So about 3.5 years ago, I set up the Loop with a colleague of mine, excuse me, who's a TJ promoter called Gregory, and that was to provide drug, alcohol and sexual health advice with a harm reduction perspective for people at festivals and nightclubs and other leisure events. And we were giving out this advice, and one of the sort of the questions and concerns we had was we were giving out advice about drugs, but we realised we didn't actually know the drugs that people were taking. So for us, as much as the users, it was a bit of a shot in the dark. So we bought a laser which identifies any drugs in 60 seconds, and we started testing with that back of house at various festivals, including Kendal Calling, Park Life, and also at nightclubs, particularly the Warehouse Project. So we've been doing that for a little while, and then in conversation with Drape and various other people, we're thinking that we can move this forward. Because what we were doing at the time, back of house testing, is we were testing drugs that were seized, confiscated on the door, in amnesty bins, those sorts of things, and then getting information back to all the on-site services. But the missing piece of that jigsaw was that users didn't know what was in the drugs they were taking, and users weren't getting that information back. So this summer, we devised this idea of multi-agency safety testing, because it is genuinely multi-agency, with the support of police, public health and local authorities. And we can talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But we set up this summer at Secret Garden Party and Kendal Calling the first ever front of house testing in the UK. So users could come, drop off small samples of concern, very small samples, one pill, a small scoop of powder, get a unique ID number, come back half an hour later, and a trained, experienced drugs worker will give them the results of the forensic tests that we conducted as part of a harm reduction package tailored to that individual. Didn't get any drugs back, totally legal, as a police officer can confirm on my left. And the idea was that this was to prioritise public safety at venues and help reduce drug-related harm on site.
Thank you. And if I could bring Freddie and John into the conversation now, what were the specific challenges and issues involved in setting this up at Secret Garden Party and at Kendal Calling?
I think having the guts to ask straight off and actually stand there and put the case out to our police. But from that point, it was actually a very positive process, and there were huge support from all the authorities from the moment we actually had the nerve to put our hand up and ask. At Kendal, I was trying to get it away at an earlier festival in the season. I got support from the local police force there, but then I did a bit more with the local authority. At Kendal Calling, we had a slightly different sort of context to introducing testing. Fortunately, the year previous, we had a fatality. A young person from Cumbria died after taking drugs at Kendal Calling. And it was with that backdrop and working with Justin and Cumbria Constabulary, we basically reviewed our whole drugs policy. The whole idea of having zero tolerance on a festival site is complete nonsense. Any police force that thinks you can have zero tolerance on a festival site, must be deluded. We can't stop drugs getting to prisons, so drugs are going to get into festival sites. So it's with that sort of background, background of fatality, the background needs to be realistic, that we need to look at what we could do to mitigate, the threat of drugs. Because what we'll do with the police force is we changed our process in this respect as well, is we'll start with doing a threat risk assessment. And, if you've got young people on a festival site, one of the threats is undoubtedly illegal drugs. And, with the support of Justin and his colleagues at Cumbria Constabulary, as well as, the local authority. That's how we got it where Kendall. But, I didn't at another festival earlier in the season.
And Justin, obviously this wouldn't have been possible without the police. How did you become involved in the alarm?
I think for Kendall Calling, I was the what they call Gold Commander. It's a very grand title, but basically it's down to me to sort of agree everything that happens on that site from a policing perspective, to work very closely with the local authority and with John to sort of how it's going to work, how the police is going to interact with the private security. And for me, it's very much about, the most important thing is about minimising the risk of harm to people going on that site. John does all of his necessary assessments as a festival organiser, and then we, from a policing context, we look at it and decide where we see the biggest threat to people. And as unfortunately played out the previous year, you cannot discount the threat of drugs. As Fiona may allude to, sometimes it's the fact that people don't know what they're taking, and that can be incredibly dangerous. So we work with John and the team. They've got a very, very good security operation. We supplement that, and we will do everything that we possibly can to prevent illegal substances getting onto the site. That goes without saying. John works very, very hard as well. We take a very pragmatic approach. There is also the availability of amnesty bins before people actually get onto the site. We will do operations within the site, and again, we are not looking for people who are users. We are looking for the people that are supplying, and we will do all we can to target those suppliers. But ultimately, as John said, what do we take the view that there will be drugs on that site, or drugs on any festival site? Yes, there will be. And what do we do then? How do we help or stop people becoming a casualty? I think that's where Fiona and the team come in. We've got to have a degree of tolerance, we've got to look at discretion, and we've got to, those people that are determined to use a controlled substance on a festival site, and why not give those individuals the option to be educated and to actually see what it is that potentially they're taking into the system. That's really, really important for me, because if we can do all we can to prevent the drugs getting on there, yet people are still want to use them, then the next layer of safety, in terms of minimising that risk, is to educate. That's where I feel this team.
I don't know who wants to take the lead on this, but regarding the mechanics on site, how does MAST actually work? How many people use the service at each event?
In terms of how it works on site, we had a big tent divided in two. There's the tent. And users could come in the front of the tent, and they would deposit a substance of concern in a little baggie in the amnesty bin, get a unique number, come back about half an hour later. In that half an hour, we had a team of about 10 chemists, all volunteers, the loops were totally by volunteers and donations, about 10 PhD chemists who would busy themselves with all the different types of testing we could do. We currently do three different types. Most sophisticated, which as I said is FTL spectroscopy with laser. And then we would give the results back in half an hour. We had 249 samples dropped off at Secret Garden Party and 50 at Cumbria. And usually when people dropped off the samples, there was a friendship group of about 3, 4, and 5 who dropped off the sample. So if we took Secret Garden Party, for example, if there were 249 samples and 4 friends, probably about 1,000 people directly made contact with the service. And we'd imagine they would then go and discuss the results with them after that. I think it's 21,000 at Secret Garden Party, thereabouts. So potentially we're reaching directly 1 in 25, and maybe indirectly something like 1 in 5. So we were very pleased with the reach of that, and we have to bear in mind there was absolutely no publicity beforehand. We didn't announce it beforehand, because these were pilots, we had no idea how it was going to pan out. You know, a little bit about it. So we didn't want huge queues right around the block, so we had absolutely no messaging before, so we were very pleased with the turnout for that. The other thing you've got to bear in mind is some people, you know, rightly were concerned and thought it was an elaborate police sting. They'd never heard of the loop. Why should they give illegal drugs to us? Would they ever see them again? And could the police pounce out and arrest them from behind the screens? So there was an element of trust, I think, for that first group of people who did it this year. But we had a lot of very positive press about it. So I think next year there'll be even greater trust and even greater pickup. In terms of what we found, what was interesting was, yes, people take drugs on site, but yes, there are people who are, so we say, chancing their arm at dealing on site at festivals that we know. Not necessarily full-time dealers, but they want to make a bit of extra money, selling whatever it might be on site, thinking they can get away with it. So we do see a lot of mis-selling on site at festivals. And we found boric acid being missold as cocaine, we found malaria tablets ground up and missold as cocaine, ketamine missold as cocaine, we found concrete being poured into little moulds and being pressed as ecstasy tablets, quite realistic looking ecstasy tablets, just 100% concrete. So we were able to flag that up, not just with the users individually, but on a daily basis we'd be meeting with the police, and also we'd respond to any medical emergencies, so Ken would call in, we were right next door to welfare, so if there were any other concerns, St John's ambulance, they could literally run round, we could identify the drugs in 60 seconds, and what the paramedics said was that helps give them extra confidence in terms of their own dealing with particular patients, and occasionally they would send people to the hospital because they weren't sure exactly what they were dealing with, but we could help them have a bit more confidence that they knew what they were dealing with. So it helped the users, but I would say it also helped the agencies on site in terms of monitoring what was circulating on a daily basis and nipping that mis-selling in the bud, because we can put out messages on social media. If you look at our Twitter account, we are the Loop UK, you'll see we regularly put out tweets for what we've tested. And the idea of that is that we raise awareness amongst all users across the UK about what's circulating on site. Not just adulterants and contaminants, but the other concern at the moment is, as I'm sure some of you will be aware, the really, really high strength MAST content ecstasy pills that are causing significant problems. We had nearly the second highest ever MDMA fatality rate last year. 57 people died from ecstasy-related deaths in the UK. So that's another concern, and we can tweet about the very, very high strength pills that are circulating on site. And we did that a couple of times at Ken recording substances that, if people say double dropped or triple dropped, they're leading to potentially lethal amounts. Bear in mind, Ken recording the previous year, the 18-year-old who died, he triple dropped ecstasy tablets. This was something that was at the forefront of all of our minds working on site this year.
What was the feedback of the users that you worked with?
I mean, fantastic, really. One of the things to say is, there's an assumption that we were testing drugs before people were going to take them, but what we found, we were surprised to find, because it was a pilot, we'd never done this before in the UK, is actually quite a lot of people came to see us on the Sunday. We were packing up and ready to go on the Sunday, and people were coming in saying, we had a really bad time taking this on Saturday night, we've got a little bit left, can you test it, tell us what it was. So there was a desire of users themselves to find out about the bad experiences they'd had and to be informed. And they engaged very productively with the service. So one of the things we asked them, we said, having now found out what's in your drugs, would you like us to dispose of them? And 18% gave over the drugs and said, yes, they wanted us to dispose of them, they didn't want to take them. So that was nearly 1 in 5, after finding out what was in the drugs, wouldn't take them.
And how closely does that reflect what's happened overseas in previous studies?
Does anybody want to talk?
We'll bring Steve in now. Steve, would you be able to talk about some of the trends that you've monitored?
I mean, the UK, it's the first time it's happened in the UK, but there have been a number of other countries that have been doing similar things for a number of years. I think in Austria there's a mobile testing unit that's got some amazing high-tech stuff in it. They've been doing drug testing at festivals in the Netherlands for some years. And there's a couple of, I think in Canada they've done it.
Yeah.
And Peru. Didn't know about Peru. So it's a first for the UK, but it's not a first globally. But there is a growing body of evidence that the work that the Loop has been doing is now feeding into that shows that it does reduce risks, and it does seem to be reducing fatalities. I think when they did it in Switzerland, there's not been any fatalities since they introduced the civil service. So it's obviously a very positive thing. I think that in the UK we do have this rather strange situation where in many arenas a more pragmatic public health and safety agenda and mindset is moving forward. I mean, certainly amongst public opinion, the media coverage of what happened in the summer was incredibly positive. Even in some of the more rabid tabloids covered it very, very positively. And amongst a lot of professional bodies and institutions, amongst academia, public opinion, media, it all seems to be moving in a very positive direction. And yet, at central government level, things seem to be either stuck or moving backwards. So we've actually seen, under the Conservative government, and particularly since the last election and the Lib Dems have moved on, that we've got more of this sort of move away from a pragmatic health approach, more to a sort of ideological abstinence and zero tolerance, and more of the sort of old school war on drugs type rhetoric. And young people shouldn't be taking drugs. They shouldn't be doing it. Not well, they are. We need to deal with that, but they shouldn't be. It's kind of like, well, okay. But if you're at events and at festivals, as you said, the reality is that whatever you do, people are going to be taking drugs, or some people are going to be taking drugs, and that has to be your starting point as a responsible event manager, and I think as a responsible policymaker, and certainly as a responsible police. But interestingly, whilst there are these various dynamics between the public opinion and central government, one of the things that central government did do was a kind of localism agenda, where a certain amount of powers have been devolved to local authorities and local police in terms of discretion about how they deal with some of these issues. And so, in a way, they've empowered local authorities to take these things into their own hands. And whilst there's a pitiful lack of leadership coming from the government, we're actually seeing leadership now being shown at a local level. And I think that is going to be, in the short term at least, the driver of change. Not just in the drugs issue in terms of drugs at festivals, but also in terms of drug law enforcement more broadly.
But, I mean, don't you think that's going to lead to the inconsistent approach that, we as festival organisers suffer from either the police force approach, where it can be inconsistent throughout the UK, and local authority approach? I mean, I think me and Freddie are very lucky that we've had a forward-thinking police force and local authority on board. The festival where I did get it way earlier this summer, the police force was supported, it's a metropolitan city. I invited the public health unit to Kendal Calling to see it happen. And they didn't even bother to turn up, you know what I mean? So I think it is going to take an element of sea change at national level. Otherwise, public health officers in casting out local authorities are always going to veer to the side of caution, is the feeling I get.
I just say that's something we can use to our strength. There's enough people in this room that can point out to their local authorities that whilst they might have once said, we don't want this because what happens if, you turn that argument on them, and it's, well, what happens if, and you've said no to a harm reduction policy like this.
I mean, that is obviously the ultimate argument. I mean, all we're trying to do is save lives. It's part of our wider harm reduction package. It addresses, what are our, chief threats. And it's not like for every festival. There's a number of festivals that we deliver where we don't perceive, the drug threat, to require, even back-of-house testing. But where that threat is high, then, you'd be stupid not to try and introduce it. And I think the best way to try and introduce it is the way that we've done it with Kendal Calling, which is to start 1 year with the back-of-house testing, so that people can see the real benefits that brings. Because we were putting up warnings, for the last 2 years with the back-of-house testing. And I think you sort of just became a little bit more comfortable with the whole process of drug testing on site.
I think you're absolutely right that there is a danger of inconsistency. That's a danger with policing of drugs. more generally. You know, if you get arrested with drugs in one police authority area, you might get prosecuted, and another one you just get sent on your way with a slap on the wrist. So it's a challenge anyway. But I think the great thing about what happened this summer, and what you've done, what we've achieved, is that we've provided a kind of proof of concept. We've broken the mould. And assuage a lot of people's concerns and fears about how it would work and what are the legal ramifications and will people use it and all the other things. And now we've answered a lot of those questions with a demonstrating that it does work and it is practical and it can be achieved. We're allowing it to move forward. And one of the things that myself and Fiona are now working on is to try and move it to the national level. So we're working with the national police agencies, and we're working with the Public Health England and the National Public Health agencies to try and get sign-on to a kind of best practice guidelines that everyone can buy into, and hopefully the industry, so that's you guys and other areas of event and club, nighttime economy industries can all buy into. And then we'll have a national basis moving forward. We won't have to go through the palaver, hopefully not quite as much palaver, of negotiating it on a sort of police authority by police authority basis. So that is the sort of phase 2, if you like. Now we've proved that it can actually work.
Thank you. And for John, Freddie, and Justin, how do you get the message across? How effective are social media channels and digital display boards, things like that?
We didn't, as Fiona pointed out, we didn't announce this beforehand in any form, and we didn't really use a load of, I suppose, electronic methods to get the message out during the event. Instead, working on the theory that we wanted people's trust and engagement in this, and we were very aware that people might worry that it was a great big trap. And so word of mouth was our biggest tool. We used all our venue operators and crews on each of our stages to basically disseminate the information, know exactly where it is, so if they saw anything they could volunteer this address for people to go to and check stuff out.
Yeah, our policy was very much to treat this as a trial, not publicise it a great deal. But interestingly enough, the week before, Christian Payne, the 18-year-old who died the year previously, his mother was interviewed by the local newspaper, and without any sort of warning from ourselves, she wasn't aware that we were going to be introducing drug testing. But she said to the local newspaper she supported the concept of drug testing sites to try and take that risk of harm away from the young people. So then we did support that article with a brief statement. But then on site it was very, very quiet. And we made learnings. We'll do it in a slightly different way in future. As soon as a uniform, whether it be a medic or security, anywhere near the testing area, then you'll see that other people going in will drop right off. So just because of that fear of it being a trap.
And Justin, would you commented on that?
We were never in the game of setting traps. We're very much looking at preventing the substances getting on the site. You will see a very robust operation to prevent it right from quite significant into the festival. If anybody was to come to a police officer and say that bag of tablets or that bag of powder they were carrying, they were on the way to get onto the site and then get it tested to make sure it's okay, well, that's not going to be with the approval of the local constabulary. So we will continue to do our very best to prevent the suppliers getting their goods onto site. However, we will do what we can to make sure that those people, irrespective of all of the advice and all of the information that they have, they decide that they're going to take a substance, then we need to offer something to make sure that they're not in the situation that we found ourselves in last year. And they've got to about minimising the risk of harm.
We completely revamped our drugs policy, and that's before we'd essentially got the testing, the food stamps or the MAST testing agreed, because we knew that having a zero tolerance policy was wrong. So, you know, working with the fields and the proposals of Kendall calling. So we've got this 3P approach, which is, you know, the first one to prevent getting drugs on site, as Justin says. You know, we've got very robust, you know, search policy, profiling policy at the point of entry to the festival. Then, within the festival site, you know, again, you know, working with our security contractor, both overt and covertly, we'll be pursuing, you know, drug dealing on the festival site. But then it's all about, you know, supporting people who do, you know, who take drugs, which is where the welfare, the testing, and everything else comes in. So that's been our new policy this year, and that's something we'll be looking at other festivals to adopt as well.
Now, the Home Office has issued the following statement. We have no plans to introduce testing centres for illegal drugs. Drugs are illegal because they are dangerous, they destroy lives and blight communities. Steve sort of said he's touched on this earlier, but what does the rest of the panel think of current government policy? Has there been a reaction in the political community to that?
I mean, I actually was at the Home Office yesterday discussing this with some officials, and they were very kind of uninterested in it, really. And I think, to a large extent, we should be reassured by that. I don't think it's something that they're going to make a fuss about, particularly. The only comment they really made was that it was an issue for the local police and local authorities, which is what we would hope for. And I think that going forward, I don't think we are going to get an enormous amount of grief from the Home Office on this. I think they're just going to let it move forward on its own. I do think that there are other issues, because obviously a lot of the harms that festival harm reduction services are seeking to reduce are not just because drugs are potentially risky, it's because of the legal policy environment in which drugs are used. A lot of the harms of drugs are actually the harms of prohibition, and we can't ignore that. And beyond making sure that proper harm reduction and testing and so on happens, there is this bigger agenda which is reforming broken, stupid, outdated drug laws, which also needs to happen. And you know, I think in the same way, I think that the festival industry has a responsibility to look after the people who go to festivals. They also have a responsibility and have influence in moving that agenda forward. So I hope people will engage in that as well. I mean, that's a lot more what Transform, the organisation I work for, do. And Freddie's been very, very, very supportive of Transform. I think a lot of people in the industry are. It's not just about decriminalising personal possession and use, which has obviously happened in a large parts of Europe and Latin America and all over the world. It's also about the debate around legalisation and regulation. I mean, there's a reason that we don't need drug testing at Secret Garden and Chemical Calling for beer. People weren't bringing their beer to get it tested because they bought it legally on the site. And they didn't buy it from gangsters. They bought it from licensed vendors. But you know, we laugh, but you know, it's a drug, it's legal, and you don't need it. You know what you're getting, and it's not going to be, you know, some of the pills that were tested at Secret Garden vary in strength. I think mine was tenfold. From like 20 milligrams of MDMA to over 200. And it's that unpredictability, it's that variation that is a key element of the risk. We don't have that with legal drugs. So there is a bigger issue around legalisation, regulation of drugs that we need to tackle. If people are using them, it doesn't make sense that they're buying dodgy drugs that they don't know anything about off gangsters. And then you put in place a service to sort of try and reduce those risks which are created by the law in the first place. It's like our drug policy sort of internally at war with itself, where it's creating harms and then allows a little bit of sort of tinkering to reduce the harms that it's creating in the first place. So there is this much bigger discussion to be had. It's not something that we can ignore. It is something that's happening. Cannabis is about to be legalised in California next week. The Democrats, please let them win. Have legalisation of cannabis as part of their platform in the USA. When things happen in the USA, it tends to flow over to Europe. I mean, it's only cannabis. I know that's not really the main drug of concern here, but this is a debate that is real, it's active, it's happening, and that we, as people who deal with events where drug use takes place, whether you like it or not, it's a debate that we have to deal with. It's going to be decriminalisation. It's harm reduction first, then it's going to be decriminalisation, but the longer term is the legalisation regulation debate as well. So I hope you can all actively engage with that as well.
Right, I've got to follow on that with something intelligent. Obviously, yes, I mean, we've been a huge supporter of transforming the Garden Party, so I'm very on board with everything that Steve said. But I mean, going back to what we're here talking about, I think what the Loop and MAST represents is a perfect example of middle ground. I think Garden Party and Kendall Calling got to the same conclusion from actually quite different angles, rather in the same way as we know in the history of Prohibition that Washington and Colorado both came to the same conclusion of decriminalisation of marijuana from very different angles. It is a good middle ground. It is the best example of compromise in what is a very hard law to balance in our industry whilst we're looking after people. And for that, I'm really, really proud to be part of it.
I mean, to go back to the original point about the Home Office and how stats in it, I mean, you know, there is an issue. You mentioned before that, you know, 57 ecstasy deaths last year, you know, the greatest number, you know, for a number of years. You know, there's no testing that was done by Public Health England, to my knowledge. You know, there's no warnings given out about particular tablets by Public Health England. The warnings that go out, you know, about particular ecstasy tablets tend to be post-fatality. They're probably not even being tested at that point, but they just know that, you know, an 18-year-old girl is taking this tablet in a nightclub in Leeds and has died. You know, we've got the ability here, you know, because, you know, when you do the testing, it's quite important. You know, you don't be doing it when people consume drugs, so we were doing it during the day. But what you've got the ability to do with this testing at festivals is, for the first time, is provide an early warning system for the UK, which the Home Office aren't doing. Public Health England are doing. But we you know, together we can try and make it a safer environment for young people to enjoy themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's a compromise what we're offering, but it's so important. It's a bit like when they introduced clean needles and needle exchanges in the UK. It was absolutely at the forefront of harm reduction, but the criticism was that it was encouraging drug use, it was condoning drug use, and that would be an easy criticism to make. But what we did this summer, front of house, we had front of house drug testing. As Steve said, we proved the point, but it is legal, it's possible, and it's ethical. And you could argue that it's unethical not to now. We have the technology, we have lasers that can identify drugs in 60 seconds. So why aren't we doing it in a more systematic way? The Loop is a tiny little charity run by volunteers, and we definitely can't do this at every festival. So we do need it to grow in a careful and ethical way for next year. I mean, in terms of next year, at least 10 festivals have asked me to do their testing already. So things are looking positive in terms of the rollout. But we do want it to grow carefully with a mind. It's one of the things I'm worried about is potentially you could go buy a laser, rock up, start doing the testing, and we just need one death related to the testing, and that could set us back many, many years. So whilst I like the idea about a more systematic national testing policy, I'm also mindful that we need to grow it carefully, ethically, and that's hopefully Steve and I can help with that in terms of the guidelines, the testing guidelines. I think one of the other things we can do in terms of the early warning system is pull the rug out from under the press and some of the inaccurate and harmful reporting of drug-related deaths. Almost every ecstasy-related death in the UK is reported in the press, usually before the toxicology report is out, and it's pure speculation. Unhelpful even to the point of causing harm. So what we can do is address that by giving out very specific information. I'd like to say that we don't put out warnings at the Loop. And we say that we're not warning people against drugs, we're not advertising drugs for them, we're just giving out the information about what the contents are so that people can make their own decisions about it. But it's important that that information gets out unfiltered by the press. And I have had battles in relation to that because people want to add warning language. They want to couch these things in a scary language, which is going to alienate users, and they're not going to take any notice of that because people who take ecstasy usually like it, enjoy it, and want to take it again, and those very unhelpful warnings. I also conduct surveys, I conduct research on festivals, and I've been conducting research at Kendal Calling for 7 years now. And quite often my research is the last question we ask people is, of all the drugs you've ever taken, legal and illegal, what's your favourite one? And quite often then the interviewee will sort of look misty-eyed and sort of recalling a past experience. But if people have tried ecstasy, disproportionately the majority will say that their favourite drug is ecstasy. People like it and they want to take it, so we do have to think about the consequences of getting information to them to reduce that number of drug-related deaths in the UK, because it's going up and ecstasy's increased by a strength of 5 times in MDMA pills, ecstasy pills in the past 5 years, but death rates have gone up by a rate of 5 times in the past 5 years. It was about 10 a year 5 years ago. So we have a growing problem. This isn't going away. It's actually getting worse.
Shall I move on? Do you want to say anything interesting?
Scary police officer on the end. Well, I mean, you know, I'm not going to comment on the policies, not my place to do that. As a police officer, all police officers in the country, we're sworn officers of the Crown. We are expected to uphold the law. That is the job, and we're sworn to keep people safe, that's to keep the public safe. However, what I would say is that enforcement isn't always the answer to keep people safe, and as police officers we have a significant amount of discretion in terms of how we actually achieve that.
Thank you. And where does MAST go from here? Fiona, I know you touched on it there, but what are the plans for the 2017 season?
I think I might have retired to, but wait. So we're hoping to expand to more festivals. We're hoping to go back to SeaCon Party and Kendal Calling. But also we've got some interesting developments. I've been conducting back-of-house testing every month at the Warehouse Project and contacted by various clubs about the possibility of rolling out testing at clubs as well. But one of the concerns about testing at clubs, which draws on what John said, is that festivals are a good place to do testing because people have a lot of time on their hands, you know, in the afternoons, idling around before the evening events. The peak time for testing at festivals was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so people were coming out relatively sober, interested in the drugs that they'd be taking that night and the contents of them. So we were able to catch them at a moment of sort of lower levels of intoxication, if you like. The concern about testing in clubs, and this is a conversation I've been having in relation to fabrics, I'm involved with a fabric case, is if you have a club where people don't turn up until after midnight, it's quite difficult to sell that to the authorities, that you're going to have meaningful, sensible discussions about the contents of drugs and the test results if they might have already been consuming substances, legal or illegal, for 6 hours a day. So one of the things that I'm currently in discussions with is about having a city centre pop-up testing booths in the city centre. And there's a couple of northern town cities that I'm having those discussions with at the moment. So my ideal before Christmas will be to have sort of loop Christmas testing kiosks in city centres. And the idea of that is that people can come along sort of 6, 7 o'clock before their evening really gets going. They can maybe get free water, free condoms, free earplugs, and also that they can test the white powders that they've got so they can find out what's in them and we can identify any substances of concern before the night starts. I think that's the thing. The problem with nightclubs is it actually might be closing the stable door after the horse is bolted.
Another thing that we've been discussing, just to say, I don't work for the Loop, my organisation's Transform, but we've sort of been working in conjunction with the Loop. Fee is the kind of the sort of Yoda of drug testing here. So you've got like a lightsaber. And we're just all acolytes. But one of the other things that we're looking at is because there does seem to be this, you know, now that the mould has been broken and the concept has been proven, there is this suddenly sort of ballooning demand for these services, even in the few months since the summer. The Loop in its current form isn't able to, just doesn't have the capacity as a small voluntary organisation to deal with. So we are looking at how we can somehow expand the capacity so that the demand from other events can be met. And one of the things we were looking at is to kind of come up with some best practice guidelines and perhaps have the Loop offering a sort of training and accreditation service. So, and again, if the industry can then buy into the accreditation kind of kite mark for individual trainers, we can avoid the sort of chances just buying a brooking machine and rocking up and asking for loads of money and not doing it properly. And so that we can, you know, because obviously the loop's not going to be able to do all of it, that we can then train and accredit other MAST service providers as the expansion pans out over the next couple of years. So that's also part of it. Alongside working at the political institution level with Public Health England and the National Police Associations and professional bodies to get buy-in from them to smooth the way for other regional areas and festivals and so on to do the same. So that's kind of where phase 2 is now moving.
Do we have any questions before I wrap up?
Hello.
It's as if the Home Office approach is binary, but Justin sort of intimated that it's sort of on a local level, it's discretionary. It's sort of, it seems a bit weird for a festival organiser to adopt the drug testing. Could Justin maybe expand a little bit on the legality of where they might stand?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's my responsibility as the local police commander to actually define what the response will be for that event. So that will be in conjunction with John, and as the event organisers will have their approach, and we will take, or ultimately I will take the decision in terms of what our approach is going to be to drugs in that particular event. By doing that, we can decide what levels of supply we are actually going to target, if there are any specific substances that we're going to target. But likewise, we can also give very specific instructions in terms of what to do about individuals who are wanting to use these sorts of services and individuals who are in possession of very small amounts of drugs. So that is what the local discretion looks like. And you can sort of liken it to what we've seen amnesties right across the country for firearms and amnesties for weapons. And there is you can apply discretion to allow people to do something which ultimately will give a leg up and give an opportunity to protect more people.
Hi, I'm from Northern Ireland, Michael McGowan. Just a question for Fiona. With the testing, how does it actually work? Someone comes to you in a festival and gives you their pill or substance, and you analyse it and you say, it's quite factual, the report you give them, it's made out of this and this. Do they say, oh, I'm not going to take that, or I'll take half of it, or what happens how do they react when you give them the results?
Oh, it's a good question. In terms of the fact it's illegal to do it, one of the reasons, before it's illegal to do it, is our drugs workers who give out the results can't incite them to commit a crime, because that's a crime in itself in the UK. So it's very important that they don't in any way be seen to encourage them to take the drug. So they give the results, but it's within a wide package, a brief intervention, if you like, a harm reduction advice package, where they ask them about their drug's history, they ask them if they've taken the drug before, they ask them what they think is in the drug, they tell them what the drug actually is, and then they give them the harm reduction advice in relation to that particular drug, and flag up if there are any combinations that there should be a particular concern, for example, like alcohol and ketamine or something like that. And then they ask them if they want them to dispose of the drug. They can't ask them if they're going to go on and take it. They can't recognise and encourage them to take it in any way. So they have to be very careful about the wording. So that this year our drugs workers got a script almost to keep to, so that they will protect, because probably the most legally tricky area is the giving out of results actually. And so to protect our volunteers, we had a script which we run past our QC, everything we do is run past our QC, and we ran it all past him so that there was no doubt that they couldn't be arrested for incitement to commit a crime. So that was the issue.
And how do people react whenever they get the results?
All sorts of really, it depends what the results are. If you tell somebody that their big bag of pills is actually concrete, then disbelief. I think shock really for things like boric acid and malaria tablets. We had quite a few of the malaria tablets being sold as cocaine. We did also have people jubilant, we have to confess, we're known to have very high strength. Unfortunately, we did have some jubilant clients, just as the
please ask at one point. So, you know, I mean, just basically the whole range of human emotions. But I think most interesting for us was that people came to us on the Sunday about after the Saturday night. We had one woman who came to us on the Sunday being hospitalised on Saturday night, and she wanted to know what was in the substances she'd taken. And nobody else would tell her that because they don't know, because they don't do the tests. Medics quite rightly deal with a medical problem, whether it's a, you know, one particular stimulant rather than another is not particularly relevant to them when they're dealing with an emergency, but to her she really wanted to know. So that feedback loop was valuable then, and we appreciated the opportunity to do that. But yeah, basically the whole range of human emotions.
I think we've got time for one last question just before lunch.
Hi there, as John and Fiona know, I'm Gordon from Zeitgeist, and we were involved in PR around Kendall Calling this year. It seems to me there needs to be a lot of people who come together to want this to happen, first of all, and to allow it to happen, and moving from the traditional zero tolerance message that festivals have tended to give out to the PPP approach is actually quite a big jump for festival promoters to take, because the implications of it are huge in terms of how they then message to the public. How important has it been to you to have to change the messaging that you put out around it, and what benefits have you found to that?
I think it's absolutely critical, because we couldn't support trying to do mass testing without changing our approach. But changing our approach, in one way, you could suggest that we're not trying to uphold the licensing objectives, which obviously is the cornerstone of all of our festivals' licenses. But we need, it comes down to the partnership working between the local authority and the police force, because if anyone is going to look at a licence review, it is going to be the police. And if you can have that sensible conversation, which we do, and I'm trying to foster it with all our festivals, and that is trying to get our whole join the process of starting right from the beginning, of setting some strategic objectives. So you're both on the same page. What do you want to get out of this festival? Obviously you want to keep the customers safe, but let's get into a bit more detail. Out of those strategic objectives, then let's do a threat risk assessment, let's do it together. And then we can identify those threats together. And then it's all about mitigation. Part of that mitigation and part of that threat is the fact that there will be drugs on site. And I think you've got the right to change your policy.
That line, because we did actually announce that we were doing testing publicly a couple of days before Kendall Calling. To me, the most critical line in the press release we put was the line that we acknowledge that drugs are likely to be taken, illegal drugs are likely to be taken on the festival site. Now, for me to be involved in writing that press release, and also you could feel everybody, that was the pivot between what we had previously done, zero tolerance, to allowing us to then implement MAST and to actually say we're implementing it. Because ultimately, there's no point in being secret about it. If you're doing it, you've got to tell people it's there. But it presents a huge problem for festival promoters, I imagine. Because then that leads to what is the local council going to say? What do the local politicians who may not all be on board with this?
Well, exactly.
All of those things.
And you know all too well. Our biggest concern was the Daily Mail going to buy? But as we've heard, the press has been neutral or supportive. Which is just paves the way to roll out what we want to roll out.
I think what you said earlier about the mother of the boy that died at Kendall previous year being supported, and I've read this in a lot of cases where she's not the only person who's been affected directly by fatality who said, actually, yeah, of course I wouldn't want my son or daughter to take drugs, but there should be testing. I think that's a really good place to start. If those people who have been so directly affected by it are able to support the concept, I think we can surely come to a point where we can allow this to happen within, the kind of framework adjustments allowed to be created around Kendal Calling and its garden park.
I mean, Transform, we've got a sort of sub-campaign called Anyone's Child, which is a group of bereaved parents who've lost children to drugs in one form or another, who are very supportive of harm reduction and the drug law reform agenda. It's very disarming for your Daily Mail type tabloids to have a mum say, I'd like to have testing of the drugs that kill my daughter, or I'd like to legalise and regulate the drugs that kill my son. It's a very striking narrative, and I think generally that both the practical and the political concerns about this are crumbling away very, very rapidly. And as we move forward and more people do, I think that's just going to accelerate. Particularly if we can get buy-in from the national police and health agencies. And they say, it's said on your press release, they say we acknowledge that drug use is likely to take place at these events, and we have to put in place effective management to reduce the risk. If they're saying it, then I think you've really smoothed away. You've basically got sort of authorisation for local police and health authorities to do it from higher up, and it should become a lot easier. That guy's really keen to ask a question. There's an arms virtually coming out of his socket.
I'm sorry, there is more on this session tomorrow. There's a breakout session featuring Fiona, Steve and Alan Miller from the NCIA. Brainstorm practice and national guidelines for drug use, health and safety services at festivals, including strategies for harm reduction and effective messaging. That's at 3:15 tomorrow.
Hi. Yeah,
No,
sorry.
go on,
I really
say what you're
just,
gonna
it's
say.
not even really a question. I just wanted to say well done to everybody involved in this, because I think it's a very brave, very mature approach.